Going through what y'all need to know to make some money on this bitch. So round two, Rams advancing like I told y'all they would last week. This one a little bit tougher. Pretty similar game though, actually in a lot of ways. So first, weather not relevant. It's gonna be pretty cold actually, which you could argue maybe keeps the score a little bit lower. I'm actually not too concerned about it because it's not like some of that legendary shit that happens in Lambeau, so should be fine. First, we got the Rams offense injury wise. One real big one being Cooper Cup. I'm doing this earlier in the week so I can get more time for it to breathe and not 5 minutes before the actual game starts. Cooper Cup though, questionable is what I would guess he ends up being listed as, and it looks like he's probably going to be limited regardless. It was a non-contact knee injury, not like a torn ACL or anything, but he looks like he could be in some trouble in terms of his full use in this game coming up. As well as David Edwards, starting guard, he was questionable going into the last game and he got hurt and was replaced by Bobby Evans. That one I don't actually care about. Bobby Evans, maybe even better than him. They're really similar, to be honest. And then we'll see what happens at quarterback. I'm just Jared Goff. They're still talking about McVay's trying to say he's going to be a starter. Jared Goff's going to play. If he played last week, there's no fucking way. So at least that's what I'm going to operate as. If that changes, I'll probably I'll figure it out from there. But first, run game. So Packers notoriously bad in run defense, and that does not change here. So even with say the Rams offensive line with Andrew Whitworth back, who's legitimately good, Rob Havenstein on the other tackle, Austin Corbett, Austin Blythe, and I'm gonna go with I think Bobby Evans is probably gonna end up playing. I don't love them as an offensive line. I do think they still have flaws that have been masked by a lot of the opponents they play. The issue is that the Packers happen to be one of those types of opponents who just have a really, really, really big weaknesses to exploit. Because on their defensive front, you talk about Kenny Clark, who's really, really good nose tackle, but nose tackles don't matter that much when you play against the Rams. They're so lateral in the way they run the ball, and unless your nose tackle is like jetting up the field consistently and like effectively, not just blindly running forward, it's hard for them to have an impact. And while Kenny Clark is really good, I think he'll have a couple moments in this game, in short yardage and stuff. He helps, but overall, he's just not that limiting against this scheme. And their other defensive tackles are awful. Dean Lowry, Tyler Lancaster are effectively the same player. They're both really bad. They get pushed around a lot. They barely shed tackle or shed blockers well. Really, really bad there. And Kingsley Kiki, maybe the defensive tackle that has the best chance in terms of actually being an athletic guy who can get up and down the field. He looks like he might be limited in this game with an injury too. We'll see his actual status. And they bring in Damon Harrison, and as I like Snag still, but he runs into the same problem with Kenny Clark, except for times a billion, where he's incapable of mattering in this game, really outside of again like goal line, short yard stuff. So you're talking about a ton of push on the offensive line because for all the Rams' problems, their guards can legitimately move the Packers' defensive tackles, and on the edges, they can really do stuff too. Now there, it's not quite as good. The Packers edge defenders, the Smith Burrows, Preston Smith and Zadarius Smith, are both legit run defenders, especially Zadarius Smith. Preston Smith kind of ran into a lot of issues this year, but Zadarius Smith really good. And you saw even last week that Rob Havenstein still has a lot of issues with just getting blown by at the line of scrimmage. Like I was gonna say consistently, maybe not to that extent, but it happens frequently enough to really make a difference. And Zadarius Smith is the type of player who does that. Now, I don't want to overrate that. It's not a huge, huge deal, but that is something to be aware of. So, yeah, that's impact on the offensive line. At the second level, Packers linebackers are trash still. Christian Kirksey, Kamal Martin. So maybe trash is a little strong. With Christian Kirksey back, maybe they're not quite awful, and Kamal Martin has done some things, but you need a level, like a real level, to compete with the Rams on in terms of run defense, and they do not meet that. We've seen that. I mean, when they played the Vikings, and who run a similar-ish, but the concept is the same, and sort of putting a lot of stress on the linebackers to make the correct plays, which they don't. And if they put in their backups, so Chris Barnes has been awful this year. People, they talk him up a little bit because he was just the one who was playing, and announcers tend to do that. If he's in the game, they'll compliment him. He has not been good. He causes a lot of issues, and that's a real bad problem. So overall, the Rams are going to be able to run the ball and run the ball consistently and well. And then in the pass game, I mean, listen, The first thing that the Packers rely on in terms of pass defense is their corners being better than the receivers they're playing against generally. And that is absolutely not the case here. Jai Alexander is really good. I have a ton of respect for him, but Robert Woods is at the level of player, the level of receiver where he gets open on anyone. And that includes Jai Alexander. Now, is it limited a little bit? Yeah, but he's fine. And on the other side, Kevin King, good enough to limit any of Josh Reynolds, Van Jefferson, or Cooper Kupp if he plays, but he's not like a shutdown guy, and he's not enough to prevent the Rams from doing really what they want to do because they play a lot through the middle of the field. And once you get there, the Packers' secondary is pretty garbage in pass coverage. Darnell Savage can flash some things time to time, and he can drive on routes well occasionally, but like down to down, he can still cause problems. Adrian Amos is fine as like a deep guy, but he's not a limiter to the 5 to 15 yard range that the Rams attack a lot. And again, the Packers linebackers are really bad in coverage. So Tyler Higbee and Gerald Everett, who are the really the receivers who matter on the Rams generally, along with Robert Woods, are going to do fine. And notice I didn't really talk about Cooper Kupp that much because Cooper Kupp, he's just not. He's a huge product of the scheme. He does some things really well after the catch. I actually think he's similar to Chris Godwin in a lot of ways. But as far as like an actual driver himself and separator, unless he's playing against trash players, he's not that good. And without him, they're still going to be fine. Is the point with their passing options? So they're going to be fine, and nothing the Packers do defensively is going to confuse Jared Goff really. So you talk about Jared Goff in a fairly pass rush. I kind of skipped. So and again, there you're talking about a tiny bit with Zadarius Smith versus Rob Havenstein, but mostly they're fine. And on the interior, where the Rams are vulnerable in pass protection, the Packers are terrible in pass rush. So Ty almost always go the offense. So you're talking about Jared Goff in a pretty comfortable pocket with options who are open and a run game that works with McVay. So I had them at 20 to 27 points. I don't think the ceiling is super high because they could struggle with actually scoring touchdowns. They're not necessarily great at that. And their big play upside just in general is low as an offense. And in this case, Adrian Amos helps a lot in that respect. So 20 to 27 points for the Rams. And real quick, something I forgot to mention too, with the Packers defense, they do this really stupid thing where they consistently try to put three safeties on the field, the third being one of Will Redmond or Vernon Scott or Henry Black, and all of them are hot garbage in run defense. So watch that too with the Rams rushing offense. I already said it was going to be good, and that contributes to that. I just kind of forgot to mention it, so that's something to watch too. But yeah, for the Packers offense here, so injury wise, nothing super relevant as far as the offense goes. Defensively, however, Aaron Donald is limited potentially in this game. He had a rib injury famously in the last game, but we'll see how that affects him. I'm assuming he's going to be able to play. Now, how limited is he going to be? That's really hard to say. I'm going to operate as if he's still useful because I can't imagine he's not. He's just too good. But that is definitely something to keep in mind. So, run game first. And there's some issues here. So, the Packers have a good offensive line, but they've gone through some injury attrition. And at this point, especially given their defense they're playing, they're not necessarily great. So, you got Ricky Wagner, Lucas Patrick, Corey Linsley, Elton Jenkins, Billy Turner. Pretty good, like I said. The Rams, though, their front, specifically like their down linemen, between Aaron Donald, Sebastian Joseph Day, who's a really super underrated nose tackle, really good. Michael Brocker, still really good. Ashawn Robinson, Morgan Fox, Greg Gaines, too, is their backup nose tackle. Like, all of those guys are good. All of them. They're very good. And they're not just going to get pushed around. And frankly, they're going to be able to control the line of scrimmage to a decent extent, especially like these guards. Listen, Elton Jenkins gets really hyped up, and he is good, but people confuse, I think, a lot of times good offensive linemen with like perfect, right? Because while they're good, they still lose, and they still lose at an amount that like limits the offense. And that's true with Elton Jenkins. That's gonna be a problem when he's playing against Aaron Donald, Michael Brockers. That's going to be a thing. And Lucas Patrick is the same thing. Now Corey Linsley, he's really good, so he helps with that. But I just want to point that out. It's not like they're going to control line of scrimmage there. And on the edges, I mean, the Rams have really good edge run defenders between Samson Ebicam and Leonard Floyd, and their rotational guys are pretty good too. And the Packers tackles, I like Ricky Wagner and Billy Turner as run blockers, but again, they're not perfect. And with this Rams team, they're not going to be controlling the line of scrimmage frequently. Now, it's not awful. It's better than for sure, like what you saw last week with the Seahawks and anything like that, but it's not really there either. So then you get to the second level, and the Rams. So Troy Reader Actually has kind of proven himself to be a decent linebacker at this point. The Rams, number 51 the Rams, he's not great, but I mean, the Packers would definitely be happy to have him on the other side of the ball. He's pretty good. And Micah Kaiser, I'm going to guess, is not so. He was barely played last week, limited with an injury. I really hope for the Rams' sake that he plays because if Kenny Young's in this game, that's going to get a lot worse, a lot quicker. But he's not awful. But Micah Kaiser and Troy Reader, if that's a two on interior, they're going to be mostly okay. And they're not going to have to deal with nearly as much traffic from the offensive line as the Packers are used to being able to put onto opposing linebackers because of how good the Rams are at the front. Similar to like what you saw when the Packers played the Buccaneers earlier in the season. Now, that game was skewed too by some early touchdowns, but the Packers, they're not like perfect on a scrimmage. So that's really an issue. And so overall, while I'm going to give them credit of having a floor just because their scheme is good and Aaron Jones is really good and Aaron Rodgers knows when to run the ball, they're not like going to be able to consistently move the ball in that way. So then you talk about the pass game. Pass rush wise, first, I mean, so the Packers mostly okay there. But again, Aaron Donald better than everyone, so if he's not limited, will be able to consistently cause pressure. And again, these other guys, both of these guards are vulnerable to people with really strong hands, Morgan Fox and Michael Brockers. It's not a perfect pocket, especially on the interior. On the edges too, Packers tackles a lot better run blockers than they are pass blockers, especially Billy Turner. And well, the Rams edge defenders I don't love as rushers. They're enough, especially over time, that the pocket for Aaron Rodgers is not going to be clean. Um, Now, is it going to be okay for sure? But it's not this ideal scenario. So then you talk about the receivers. Rams really good corners, maybe the best in the NFL. But Devontae Adams. So I talked about this with Robert Woods on the other side of the ball. Devontae Adams is that times 10. He is just unguardable by anyone. And that actually specifically includes Jalen Ramsey. So you've seen Jalen Ramsey. Now I've talked about how this would happen. Really limit or shut down DeAndre Hopkins and DK Metcalf. Neither of those guys are even close to what Devontae Adams is, especially as a separator. DeAndre Hopkins, of course, he does other things, and so does DK Metcalf that make them really good receivers. But Devontae Adams is way better than both of them, especially as a separator. And the way he does it is a way that Jalen Ramsey is vulnerable to. Jalen Ramsey, we've seen get burned by these types of receivers before, despite how good he is. So Devontae Adams is still going to be really good. And there are other guys, because they're going to have Jalen Ramsey and shadow him, I'm sure. Troy Hill, Darius Williams, I really like both of them. The problem is that the other Packers receivers are not very good anyway. Normally, they're used to that. And because of how small those guys are, these 6'4", 6'5" dudes that the Packers throw out, when they get one-on-one coverage down the field, they're probably still going to have an advantage despite the corners. The corners are going to shadow them pretty much perfectly. They're going to be in their pocket the whole time. But with NFL receivers, especially Allen Lazard, that's still an option. So yeah, I mean, there's options for the Packers. They're not great, like perfect, but they're still really good. And then as far as Aaron Rodgers goes, so we saw, and I talked about how Russell Wilson would actually be limited by the rush that the Rams provide and the way they play defense, which of course ended up being true. That is also the case here to an extent, but not nearly the same extent. Aaron Rodgers plays quarterback a lot different than Russell Wilson does. And while the Rams' ability to keep in the pocket is going to hurt him, like the real huge ceiling that he has, his floor as a player in the pocket is way higher than Russell Wilson's. He's still really good. And when you give him a matchup where Devontae Adams is fine in a pocket that's not like a disaster, he's going to move the ball and score points. We see it over and over again. It doesn't change here. So I have them at 23 to 30 points. Again, I'm giving credit by keeping it that low to the Rams defense and to the Rams offense for their ability to keep the ball on the ground. And actually, frankly, that's why I think this is on the higher end for the Packers. But despite how good the Rams defense is, am I actually worried about them shutting down the Packers? No, just absolutely not. So I have them at 23-30, Rams 20-27. The spread on this game is the Rams underdogs by 7. And I'm going to feel really strongly that that's bettable, that the Rams plus 7 is really bettable, because that's just way too big of a number for a team that plays the way the Rams do in this matchup. Is this perfect for the Rams? No, but they're fine. Like I talked about, when you give them a lot of advantages, especially offensively, and the defense just as good baseline as it is, it's really hard to cut a 7. I think it's really similar to the Bills-Colts game, which I talked about, the Colts plus 7, which was the line in that game too, was really good bet, which ended up happening. And I feel the same way here. Now, I do still think the Packers will win this game, whereas I talked in the Colts-Bills, I thought that was more of a coin flip would win. This one, I'm much more confident of the Packers actually coming out on top in the end. Rodgers he's that good. And the Devontae Adams thing, like I said, it really means a lot. So the Packers money line. As far as the over under goes, I do think the over is so it's at 45 and a half, and I don't really think that's bettable. That's it's just kind of this neutral number that I would lean the over, but you are talking about two teams that can play this real ball control style at times, and it's not a guarantee, especially with the Rams, that they get into the end zone despite moving the ball well. So that I wouldn't really touch. It's just a little bit too high, but I would lean on the over. But yeah, I definitely Packers gonna win this game, move on. But Rams plus 7